The quiet beginning. In a corner of the universe, humanity was feared but not truly understood. Across the stars, many races spoke of the humans in whispers, calling them exterminators. The universe had seen the power of humanity, quick to fight, quick to destroy, and quick to conquer. But they had never truly faced them, and so they believed the stories of destruction were just rumors. But now, a new chapter was about to begin. On a planet called Arintia, a peaceful species called the Arintians were facing a terrible crisis. The Lycro, a ruthless alien race, had invaded their planet, wiping out entire cities with terrifying speed. The Arintians were skilled in science and peaceful diplomacy, but they were not warriors. They needed help, desperate help. In their time of need, they turned to the humans, who had a reputation for being merciless in battle. What the Arintians didn't know was that the humans were more than just warriors. They were the true embodiment of chaos. Captain Elias, a seasoned veteran of countless battles, was assigned to lead the human team to Arintia. He was a leader known for his cold calculation, his ability to think in the heat of the moment, and most importantly, his willingness to use any means necessary to win. His team consisted of the best soldiers, engineers, and strategists humanity had to offer. They were skilled in using high-tech weapons, advanced tactics, and most of all, they were known for their unpredictability. As the human fleet descended upon Arintia, the planet's sky was filled with alien ships, vast, intimidating, and armed to the teeth. The Arintians stood on the surface, watching in awe as the human warships broke through the atmosphere and touched down with perfect precision. They had heard of the humans, but they never truly believed the stories. Now, they were about to find out exactly what humanity could do. The team disembarked, stepping onto the foreign soil of Arintia. The air was thick with tension, and the distant sound of explosions rumbled across the horizon. Elias stood tall, surveying the landscape with a sharp eye. This was no ordinary mission. This was going to change everything. The Arintians were watching closely, waiting for the humans to act. They had called for help, but what kind of help would it be? Captain Elias, an Arintian ambassador, said, stepping forward with his hands raised in peace, "We are grateful for your aid, but we must warn you. The Lycro are unlike any enemy we have faced. They are brutal, cunning, and relentless. I hope you understand the scale of the battle you are about to enter." Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. "We're aware, but we don't fight the same way you do," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "You've asked us to save your people. Trust me, we will." The ambassador hesitated, his eyes filled with doubt. He had heard of humanity's reputation, but to unleash the full force of their military might on the Lycro, it seemed too much, even for him. But he had no choice. The Lycro had already taken several key cities, and the Arintians were running out of options. They needed the humans. Elias signaled to his team, and the humans began to move. They immediately set up advanced equipment to track the Lycro movements. It was clear that the Lycro didn't expect humans to arrive so quickly or so efficiently. The Lycro had taken Arintia for granted, assuming the peaceful Arintians would never fight back with the same ferocity as their kind. What they didn't know was that the humans were far different from any species they had encountered before. The Arintians watched, wide-eyed, as the humans deployed an array of weapons and started gathering intel. Their precision, their speed, their quiet confidence, it was like watching an unstoppable machine in motion. The Lycro, meanwhile, were preparing for their next attack. They had overrun most of the planet, taking control of major cities and scattering the Arintian forces. The Lycro had no idea what was coming. They expected to fight the same weak resistance they had crushed in every other world they had invaded. But what the Lycro didn't realize was that the humans weren't just another race to be beaten. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to evolve, and most importantly, to destroy. And now, they were about to find out exactly how dangerous the exterminators truly were. As night fell on Arintia, the humans began their counteroffensive. It wasn't just a battle. It was a statement, a message sent across the stars to anyone who dared underestimate humanity. The Yikro would feel their wrath soon enough. The first strike came without warning, a sudden, intense bombardment from above. The Yikro were still gathering their forces when the human forces launched their assault. It was a show of strength, a warning shot that shook the very ground beneath the enemy's feet. The Yikro had no time to react. The battle had begun, and from that moment on, nothing would be the same. The Arintians watched in stunned silence as the humans unleashed their chaos. Their fear began to fade as they realized the truth. Humanity wasn't here to help. They were here to win, and win they would. The universe had called humanity exterminators, but now the universe would see what true chaos meant. The first strike. The battlefield was silent for a moment, as if the planet itself had taken a deep breath. On one side, the peaceful Arintians, their hope now pinned on the humans, watched as the humans moved into position. They were like a well-oiled machine, their movements smooth and deliberate. On the other side, the Yikro, powerful, ruthless, and completely confident in their victory, were preparing their defenses. They had no idea what was coming. Elias stood at the front of his team, scanning the horizon with a look of cold determination. His team was ready. They had trained for this, prepared for the impossible. They had no intention of simply driving the Yikro back. They were going to destroy them. Elias had seen too many worlds fall to invaders, and he wasn't about to let that happen again. The Arintians had asked for help, but now humanity was taking matters into their own hands. All units ready for deployment, Elias said, his voice steady, but with an edge of excitement that only a warrior knows. Let's show them what we're made of. At his signal, the first wave of attacks began. From high above, human spacecraft dropped precision-guided bombs, each one targeted with laser-like accuracy. The explosions were deafening, ripping through Yikro positions with terrifying speed. The ground shook as the Yikro's fortifications crumbled, their defenses completely shattered. The Yikro had barely enough time to react before the next wave hit. They had no idea who they were fighting. The Yikro commanders scrambled, trying to regroup their forces, but they were too slow. The humans weren't waiting for them to catch their breath. Instead, they moved in fast and hard, using advanced technology and guerrilla tactics that confused and overwhelmed the Yikro. Commander Jarek, one of the Yikro generals, growled, slamming his fist onto the console in frustration. How could they strike so quickly? We were not prepared for this. Jarek, a massive Yikro with scales like armor, his eyes burning with rage, didn't answer. He had never seen anything like this before. Humanity had entered the battlefield like a storm, completely unpredictable and ruthless. He was beginning to realize that they weren't just soldiers. They were something else, something far more dangerous. As the humans advanced, their weapons cut through Yikro soldiers with terrifying precision. Plasma cannons fired from their ships, reducing entire squads of Yikro to ash in moments. On the ground, human infantry moved swiftly and efficiently, their advanced rifles and grenades creating chaos among the Yikro lines. The aliens were starting to panic. But it was Elias's leadership that turned the tide. He wasn't just fighting a battle. He was dismantling the enemy's morale, breaking their spirit with every strike. With his team, he launched wave after wave, each one stronger than the last. His tactics were unconventional, his mind working on a level the Yikro couldn't comprehend. They had expected a war of attrition, where the strongest would survive. Instead, they were facing an enemy that didn't fight by the rules. On the front lines, Sergeant Cole, one of Elias's most trusted soldiers, had taken up a position near a Yikro heavy artillery base. He and his squad were crouched behind debris, their weapons aimed at the enemy lines. The moment the Yikro started to advance, Cole signaled his squad to move. Within seconds, the area was filled with explosions as grenades and explosive devices took down the Macro heavy artillery units, leaving them vulnerable. The White Crow were fighting on two fronts, from above and on the ground. And still, they couldn't catch up. Every time they tried to counter, the humans were already one step ahead. "Captain," Cole said through his comm, "we've breached their defenses. They're in full retreat." Elias nodded, his face grim. "This is only the beginning. We're not here to push them back. We're here to crush them." The Yukro were beginning to realize that this was not a conventional battle. The humans were not simply trying to hold ground or push them out. They were annihilating them. The humans were like a force of nature, unyielding and relentless. The Yukro had never faced such an enemy. They had never faced humans. As the first night of battle drew to a close, the humans had already secured vital positions. The Yukro had suffered devastating losses, and their morale was in shambles. Their commanders were scrambling to come up with a countermeasure, but the humans were already deep inside their defenses, cutting off their retreat routes. The Arintians stood on the sidelines, their hearts filled with awe. They had heard the stories of humanity's brutal efficiency, but now they were witnessing it firsthand. They had never seen anything like it. The humans were not just fighters. They were an unstoppable force, a tide of destruction that seemed to have no end. Captain Elias walked through the battlefield, his team moving with him. There was no celebration, no cheering. They had a job to finish. They knew the Yukro weren't defeated yet. They had only just begun to show their true strength. But for now, Elias allowed himself a moment of reflection. "We've taken the first step," he said, his voice low. "But there's more to do. We finish what we start." And with that, the humans moved forward, ready to bring chaos to the Yukro, ready to show them just what humanity was capable of. As the night sky darkened, the Yukro forces began to regroup, but they knew one thing for sure. They were not ready for what was coming next. The tide turns. By the third day of battle, the Yukro had suffered losses that no one had predicted. Their once pristine defensive positions lay in ruins, littered with the wreckage of their war machines and the bodies of their soldiers. What had started as a confrontation had turned into an outright rout. The Yukro commanders knew they needed to adapt quickly or face total destruction. Elias's forces, meanwhile, showed no signs of slowing down. The human war machines, coupled with their tactical brilliance, were overwhelming the Yukro's attempts to regroup. But what made the situation even more dire for the aliens was the relentless nature of the human combatants. They didn't retreat. They didn't get tired. Every move they made seemed preordained, precise, and devastating. They were unstoppable. "I've never seen anything like this," General Zarek, the Yukro commander, muttered to his staff. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled as he studied the real-time updates. "We underestimated them. We all underestimated them." The situation was getting out of hand. The Yukro had deployed their most advanced weaponry, their most fearsome soldiers, yet every effort to break the human lines had failed. Instead of being overwhelmed, the humans had adapted faster than anyone could have imagined. Their unpredictable nature on the battlefield was something the Yukro couldn't match. In one sector of the battlefield, Sergeant Cole's squad was securing an abandoned Yukro bunker. It was located in the heart of what had once been the Yukro's stronghold. His team moved in silently, navigating the area with precision. They knew the Yukro might be laying traps, but they had already outsmarted the enemy once and weren't about to let their guard down now. "Stay sharp," Cole ordered, as they approached the bunker. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the sky, reminders of the ongoing battle. "This is where they'll make their last stand." The squad moved into the bunker, clearing it room by room. Inside, they found a cache of highly classified alien technology, tools and weapons meant to end the human advance. But the humans had other plans. Within moments, Cole and his team began planting explosives, rigging the bunker to implode once the final Yukro forces were inside. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the battlefield, Elias led a daring raid against a Ukro supply line. His team infiltrated the aliens' rear positions, cutting off their ammunition and fuel supplies. The Ukro were starting to realize that this war wasn't just about guns and explosions. It was a war of attrition. The humans knew how to disrupt supply lines, how to break an enemy from the inside. "I've seen entire worlds fall to the Ukro," Elias said grimly to his team as they moved deeper into enemy territory. "But here, they'll have no reinforcements. No one will come for them. And once they're cut off from the rest of their fleet, they'll have no choice but to surrender or die trying." Despite the Ukro's fierce reputation, it was becoming increasingly clear that humanity wasn't just another species to subdue. They were a force of nature, an unstoppable tidal wave crashing against the Ukro's hardened defenses. Every move the humans made pushed the aliens further toward collapse. But Elias knew that they weren't finished yet. The Ukro weren't a species that would just give up. He had studied their tactics and knew they would keep coming, no matter the cost. The humans had only just begun to show what they were capable of. And it was far from over. As the sun set, casting an orange glow over the battlefield, the Ukro found themselves reeling. Their once mighty forces were in disarray, and their command structure was starting to fall apart. Elias could feel it in his bones. The Ukro were on the verge of breaking. They would either flee or fight to the death. "Prepare for a final push," Elias ordered his team. "We end this tonight." On the other side of the battlefield, General Zarek had finally received the message. The Ukro were out of options. The human forces had overwhelmed them at every turn. His fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its original strength, and their morale was shattered. But there was still one last card to play. He made a decision that would change the course of the war. Launch the counteroffensive. "We'll fight to the last man if we have to." Zarek's declaration echoed through the Ukro chain of command, and the order was given. The final counteroffensive would be their last stand, but it was a desperate move. The humans had already shown they could dismantle everything the Ukro had to offer, and the aliens were starting to realize that their greatest strength, their overwhelming numbers, couldn't match humanity's unpredictability, resourcefulness, and sheer tenacity. Elias's face hardened as the battle raged on, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. The Ukro had made their move. They were finally fighting back with everything they had left. The humans would need to give their all if they were going to end this once and for all. As the night wore on, the stakes of the conflict were clear. The Ukro would either be driven into extinction or forced to submit. The humans had taken the first steps in an unrelenting campaign that would shake the universe to its core. This battle was far from over, and neither side was prepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. The final push. The battlefield had turned into a war-torn wasteland. Every inch of ground seemed to be soaked in the chaos of battle, cratered by explosions, littered with debris, and stained with the blood of both Ukro and human soldiers. The once pristine alien landscape had been forever altered by the ferocity of humanity's assault. It was the final push, the Ukro's last stand, and Elias knew this would be the most dangerous part of the campaign. The Ukro, now outnumbered and fragmented, had gathered what remained of their strength in a desperate counteroffensive. Zarek's forces, once formidable and organized, were now little more than a broken shell of their former might. But they were still dangerous, ferocious, unwilling to surrender, and driven by the bloodthirsty will to resist until the end. The humans, on the other hand, had become a relentless force of nature, driven not just by military strategy, but by a primal will to survive and win. "Hold your ground," Elias shouted over the comms as the final battle approached. His voice was steady, though the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. This was the moment that would decide the fate of humanity in this galaxy. If they failed, it wouldn't just be a defeat, it would be the end of human resistance. The Ukro, however, were not going down without a fight. They launched wave after wave of attacks, using everything they had left. Their most fearsome warriors, their dreadnought-class battle mechs, charged forward, their weapons firing relentlessly as they stormed towards the human lines. Behind them, the Yikro's remaining ships launched aerial bombardments, trying to force the humans into submission. But humanity had learned to adapt, and adapt they did. The human forces had already seen the Yikro's strategies, had already outplayed their tactics, and now they were ready for anything. Sergeant Cole's squad moved swiftly through the battlefield, executing their mission with deadly precision. Each human soldier had been trained to expect the unexpected, to thrive in the chaos of war. They took cover behind the wreckage of fallen micro-mechs, using their advanced tech and quick thinking to disable the alien war machines one by one. Cole's squad had become the predators, and the Yikro were the prey. "Take out the central command node," Cole ordered as they moved toward a heavily fortified alien structure. The structure housed the Yikro's remaining commanders. If they could break it, the Yikro would lose any semblance of organization. Meanwhile, Elias led the larger human force on the front lines, their objective clear: drive the Yikro back once and for all. The humans had not just fought for victory. They were fighting for the very survival of their species. They fought not just with guns and bombs, but with everything they had: their ingenuity, their resilience, and their refusal to yield. "I want everything you've got," Elias bellowed, his voice a mix of anger and determination. "No retreat, no surrender. This ends here, today." The Yikro, though wounded and weakened, fought like cornered animals. They refused to give up. Zarek, in his command post, watched in disbelief as human forces poured forward, their resolve unshakable. He had expected the humans to falter, to break under the pressure, but they didn't. They kept coming. The Yikro generals had underestimated humanity's willpower, their cunning, and their sheer determination to survive. Now, they were paying the price. The once immense alien army was collapsing, one unit at a time, unable to withstand the human onslaught. Just as the Yikro began to retreat, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. The ground trembled as one of the Yikro's last dreadnought mechs was blown apart by a well-placed human missile. The shockwave sent debris flying, creating a massive cloud of dust and smoke. For a brief moment, everything seemed to stop. The battlefield went silent, save for the distant cries of soldiers and the crackling of flames. "Move in now," Elias ordered. His voice was urgent, commanding, and filled with the energy of a man who could see victory just within his grasp. As the human forces advanced into the heart of the Yikro stronghold, the last of the alien resistance faltered. The once proud Yikro were now scattered, their morale shattered, their unity destroyed. The humans, though battered and bloodied, pushed forward with unstoppable momentum. Cole and his squad reached the command center, planting explosives in key areas, ensuring that even if the Yikro tried to regroup, they would have no place to run. The Yikro generals had no choice but to retreat. There was no victory to be found here. In the final moments of the battle, Elias stood at the front lines, watching as the Yikro forces scattered, their defenses crumbling. The Yikro fleet, their last hope, was now in disarray, unable to respond to the human assault. Victory was within reach, but Elias knew that this wasn't just a military triumph. It was a statement. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. A species underestimated, a species written off as primitive, had just crushed an empire. The Yikro had come to the galaxy with the intent of exterminating humanity, but in the end, they had been the ones defeated. The humans had turned the tide, and in doing so, they had ensured their place in the universe, not as exterminators, but as the ones who would never be underestimated again. The shattered empire. The battlefield was eerily quiet now, the sounds of destruction fading into the distance. The once terrifying Yikro had been utterly decimated. What had once been a proud and mighty empire now lay in ruins. The human forces, victorious yet weary, moved through the remnants of the battlefield with a solemn yet triumphant air. Elias stood on a hill overlooking the destruction. His face, though grim from the cost of war, carried the faintest hint of a smile. The Yikro had underestimated humanity at every turn, and now they had learned the hard way that humans were not a species to be taken lightly. This victory was more than just military. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the unyielding drive to survive, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. The remaining Micro soldiers, those who hadn't fled or been killed, were taken prisoner. The human forces rounded them up with military precision, making sure that no one was left to fight another day. The once feared Yikro dreadnoughts, the symbol of their overwhelming power, now lay in pieces, their advanced technology rendered useless against the might of humanity. "We did it," Cole said, his voice filled with disbelief. He and his squad had been at the heart of the battle, and even now, the weight of their victory seemed almost too much to comprehend. Elias nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. It's over. For them. But even as the immediate threat of the Yikro Empire began to fade, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. He had witnessed the devastation that humanity had unleashed in just a matter of days. The Yikro had underestimated them, but they wouldn't be the last to do so. The galaxy would now know the truth. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. He couldn't help but think back to those first moments, when humanity had been labeled as nothing more than a primitive species, a race to be exterminated. It had seemed impossible that they could even survive against such powerful alien forces, let alone defeat them. Yet, here they were, the victors, the ones standing tall amid the ashes of their enemies. "I think this victory means something more," Elias muttered to himself. "It means we're not just here to survive anymore. We're here to conquer. We're here to rewrite the rules." As the final remnants of the Yikro army retreated into the depths of space, Elias gathered his officers for a meeting. The war was over, but the galaxy had changed forever. The human race had proven that it was capable of achieving the impossible, and that they would no longer be the underdogs in a galaxy full of superior species. "The Yikro are defeated," Elias began, addressing the group. "But this is just the beginning. We've proven that humanity can do what no one else thought possible. We can challenge the strongest, the most advanced races, and we will continue to do so." The officers nodded, their expressions filled with a mix of exhaustion and pride. They had fought hard, lost comrades, and witnessed horrors that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But they had prevailed. One of the officers, Sergeant Taylor, spoke up. "What now, sir? What do we do with the Yikro prisoners? And what about the other races? They'll know what we've done. They'll come for us." Elias paused, considering the question. The Yikro had been powerful, but now they were shattered. Their empire was no more. The human victory had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, and every race, every species, would now be forced to reckon with humanity's potential. "We'll take the prisoners and ensure they can never threaten us again," Elias replied. "As for the other races, let them come. We're ready for them. If the galaxy thought humanity was weak, they'll have another thing coming." In the weeks that followed, the human forces began to consolidate their power, reinforcing their borders, and preparing for whatever might come next. The galaxy was watching, waiting for humanity's next move. No longer were they the underdogs. No longer were they the species to be exterminated. Humanity had proven that when pushed to the edge, they would not only fight back, they would rise above, crush their enemies, and show the galaxy what true chaos meant. As the final Yikro ship limped away from the battlefield, Elias stood watching it disappear into the stars. The universe had called humanity exterminators, but they had just unleashed a force of their own, a force so powerful that no one would ever again question the strength of the human spirit. The Yikro Empire had fallen, but in its place, a new chapter in human history had begun. The galaxy would never forget the name of the species that had turned the tide of war, proving once, and for all that no one, no matter how powerful, could ever truly extinguish humanity's fire. The awakening of the galaxy. The aftermath of the war left a profound silence. The battle had been won, but the galaxy, now aware of humanity's unprecedented power, was far from settled. Across the stars, rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers of a species that could shatter empires and destroy entire civilizations with only the strength of its will. No one was sure what to expect from the humans now. The Lycro, once a dominant force in the galaxy, were no more. Their once mighty empire was reduced to rubble, their terrifying fleet scattered across the universe. But the other species, the ones who had watched from the sidelines, were now on edge. They had seen the humans in action, witnessed their brutal efficiency, and understood that humanity was a force that could no longer be ignored. Elias and his team knew that their work was far from over. The victory against the Lycro had been swift and decisive, but it was also a wake-up call to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had risen from nothing and shown its potential. It had challenged the galaxy's most powerful species, and it had won. But what came next? Would humanity continue its reign of terror, or would it seek peace? Elias stood on the balcony of his command ship, staring out at the stars. The universe, once so vast and untouchable, now seemed within reach. The human fleet was no longer a scattered collection of ships struggling to survive. It was a powerful, unified force ready to make its mark on the galaxy. "We can't let them forget what we've done," Cole said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "The Lycro were just the beginning. The galaxy needs to know that humanity isn't just here to survive. We're here to dominate." Elias nodded. "You're right. But we also need to remember why we fought. It wasn't just for power. It was for freedom. We can't let the victory go to our heads. The galaxy will come for us if we overstep. We need to move cautiously." The crew around him was silent, contemplating the weight of his words. Humanity had fought for its freedom, for the right to exist without fear. But the taste of victory was sweet, and it was easy to see how power could corrupt. Elias was determined not to let that happen. He would lead humanity into the future, but he would do so with a steady hand and a clear vision. A transmission came through, breaking the silence. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Admiral Alvarez, the leader of the human fleet. "Elias," Alvarez said, his voice crackling through the comms. "We've received word from several other species. They're asking for an audience with us. They want to discuss what comes next." Elias raised an eyebrow. "What do they want?" "Answers. They want to know if we're a threat, or if we're willing to negotiate." The question hung in the air for a moment. Elias knew that this moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy. How they responded would determine whether they would be seen as rulers or conquerors, allies or enemies. "We'll meet with them," Elias said, his voice firm. "But we'll make it clear that humanity will not be intimidated. We've earned our place here, and we won't be pushed around by anyone." Cole stepped forward, a slight grin on his face. "Looks like it's time for round 2. Elias chuckled, but the weight of the conversation lingered. The galaxy was watching, and humanity's next move would be crucial. The meeting was set. Representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy would gather to discuss the future of the universe in the wake of humanity's unexpected rise. Elias and his team would be there, standing at the forefront of a new era. The question remained, would the galaxy accept humanity's power, or would they resist? As the human fleet prepared for the diplomatic summit, Elias felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The fate of humanity and the galaxy rested in their hands. The battle for survival was over. Now came the struggle for dominance, and Elias was determined to ensure that humanity's future would be one of strength and respect. "We've made our mark," Elias said quietly. "Now we make our place in the galaxy. We won't be forgotten." The stage was set. The galaxy, once a distant and unknowable place, was now a battleground of politics, power, and influence. And humanity, once seen as weak and primitive, had emerged as its most formidable force. But in this new era, Elias knew one thing for certain. Humanity would never be content to simply survive. They would thrive. They would lead. And they would leave their mark on the galaxy forever. The unforeseen consequence. The day of the summit arrived, and the galaxy's most powerful representatives gathered in the massive council hall, a colossal structure floating in the void of space. From every corner of the galaxy, leaders and diplomats of alien species, each one with their own agenda, arrived in sleek starships, ready to negotiate the future of the galaxy. Elias and his crew stood on the steps of their ship, gazing up at the imposing structure. He had always been a soldier, a warrior, and now he was being thrust into the role of a diplomat. He understood the stakes, but his mind couldn't help but race back to the battlefield, the cries of victory still echoing in his ears. The Lycro had been defeated, but this new war, this war of words, of power and influence, was just beginning. As the human delegation entered the council hall, the murmurs of the alien diplomats filled the air. They had never seen humans up close, and they couldn't quite figure out what to make of them. Humanity had shattered the galactic order with their sheer unpredictability, and the very idea that such a primitive species could rise to power left a bitter taste in the mouths of many. Elias stood tall at the front of the delegation, a resolute expression on his face. His crew was by his side, each one carefully chosen for their skills in both combat and diplomacy. They had fought and bled for humanity's survival, and now they were ready to fight for its future. The alien representatives looked down on humanity with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and resentment. Their eyes narrowed as Elias and his team approached the center of the Grand Hall. The various species, the Varlek, the Zedrith, and the Terak, were all present, their cold, calculating eyes fixed on the humans. The council was about to begin, and Elias knew that everything hinged on the next few moments. "Welcome, humans," a Varlak diplomat said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We've been watching you." Elias didn't flinch. "We didn't come here to be watched. We came here to discuss the future of this galaxy, one that we will no longer be on the fringes of." The Varlak's expression twisted with disdain. "You speak boldly for such a young species. You forget your place." Elias stepped forward, his voice steady and filled with quiet power. "We've never known our place, and for too long, the galaxy has assumed we would stay in it. But humanity doesn't bow. We don't kneel. We don't wait to be given what we deserve. We take it." A hushed silence fell over the room as the weight of his words sank in. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful species were listening, not just to the words, but to the conviction behind them. Elias wasn't just a soldier, he was a leader, and under his command, humanity was no longer the underdog. The Zedrith diplomat, a creature with spiny, reptilian features, leaned forward with a scoff. "You are nothing but a fluke. A momentary spark. You can't sustain this power." Elias met his gaze, unwavering. "You underestimate us, and you've underestimated every human who has ever stood up for what they believe in. We don't need time to prove ourselves. We already have." The council was silent. The other representatives shifted uncomfortably, their minds working to process the implications of humanity's rise. They had seen what Elias and his team were capable of on the battlefield, but they had never considered what humanity might do on the political stage. In the back of the room, a Terak general, a towering figure covered in thick, armored plating, stood up. His voice echoed with authority. "If you seek peace, then we will listen. But know this, should you threaten the galaxy again, you will face consequences. No species will allow you to disrupt the balance." Elias' eyes hardened. "We're not here to threaten. We're here to ensure that humanity has a place in this galaxy, just like any other species. And if you try to stop us, we'll remind you why humanity's name will echo across the stars." The Terak general's gaze softened ever so slightly, but there was still a hardness in his eyes. We will see if your words hold weight." A quiet murmur spread through the room. The tension was palpable. The other representatives were waiting for the next move, the next statement, the next threat. But for the first time, they realized that humanity was not afraid. The meeting stretched on, filled with uneasy negotiations and tentative discussions. But despite the words exchanged, one thing was clear. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not a species to be underestimated. The alien representatives had come to the table expecting weakness. They left knowing humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As Elias and his team made their way back to their ship, the weight of the summit hung heavy in the air. They had made their stance clear. Humanity was here to stay, and they would take their place among the stars. But they had also made an enemy of those who saw their power as a threat. "We've made our mark," Elias said, his voice steady but filled with a new understanding of the future. "Now, we wait, but we've proven that we belong here, and we won't back down." As the human fleet powered up, preparing to leave the council hall, the galaxy was left with a thought that would linger in the minds of every species. Humanity was no longer a force to be ignored, and from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same.